A sea of glass in the soft April weather, wandering through the yellow grass where the sheep stand and blather, roaming the cliffs in the morning light, hearing the gulls that cry there, not knowing where I'll sleep tonight, not much caring either. I haven't got a stiver, the tractor's pinched me job, I owe the bar a $5 and the barman 15 bob. The good times are over, the monkey man has foreclosed, the woman has gone with the drover, not being what I supposed. I used to get things spinning, I used to dress like a lord, mostly I came out winning, but that's all gone by the board. Pants have lost their creases, have fallen down on me luck, the world has gone to pieces, everything's come unstuck. Roaming the cliffs in the morning light, hearing the gulls that cry there, not knowing where I'll sleep tonight, not much caring either. Wandering above a sea of glass in the soft April weather, wandering through the yellow grass, close to the end of my tether.
To the people who have lived with these convictions, I want to say I'm sorry that our politicians are wimps, but more than that, that they're hypocrites. We have baseline data that shows that 80% of New Zealanders will use cannabis or try it by the time that they're 21 years old, and that includes a majority of our parliamentarians who now sit comfortably in a chamber overseeing a law that criminalises, prosecutes and ruins the lives of people who did exactly the same thing that they did. I want an Aotearoa New Zealand where nobody carries cannabis convictions, but more than that, I want a complete overhaul of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975. Since 1980, we have 124,000 convictions for low-level cannabis offences, basically possession and use. In the last year alone, 44% of cannabis convictions were applied to Māori. When you take that into account with the whole population being 15% Māori, you can come to see how this discrimination is really playing out. It was never actually about the drugs. I mean, if it was, you'd be taking a harm-based health intervention type of approach. This has always been about criminalising and prosecuting certain communities for utilisation of substances that are proliferated across demographics in our society. Perhaps most concerning is the data that shows that of the cannabis convictions in 2020 to 2021, 68% of those charges were for young people aged between 20 to 39. When you're talking about the impact of those convictions at the start of somebody's life, you're talking about impediments to getting access to education, to employment, to housing, to future opportunities, and definitely to travel. That is a massive barrier to young people getting their lives on the so-called straight and narrow, which is supposedly the point of these laws in the first place. This conversation has been reignited by the moves of the birthplace of the war on drugs, the United States of America, which several decades ago decided that we were going to try and eliminate drugs from planet Earth by criminally prosecuting as many people as we possibly could, but only if they came from largely poorer neighbourhoods and more structurally marginalised backgrounds. Of course, that did not work, and we're starting to see with the moves from the likes of Joe Biden, even that birthplace of the war on drugs is starting to admit failure. In a nutshell, if we were to wipe cannabis convictions tomorrow, we would have a far more equitable situation where we recognise the reality that it simply doesn't add up that 124,000 New Zealanders have been criminally prosecuted for low-level cannabis convictions in the past few decades, while 635,000 New Zealanders used cannabis just last year alone. People will say that legal regulation or decriminalisation is chaos, but what we have right now is chaos. We still spend 4 times as much money on criminal prohibition enforcement than we do on health-based interventions. And I think the question has to be who really benefits from criminal prosecution, because it's definitely not people who are actually struggling with addiction and abuse issues either.
Last week, Thailand became the latest country to legalise the cultivation and possession of cannabis. Here, of course, Kiwis voted against cannabis legalisation at the 2020 election. Changes to the Misuse of Drugs Act have seen police apply discretion for a lot of low-level drug offending. But one part of the traditional prohibition model continues: aerial cannabis raids. And despite internal documents which question the effectiveness of the helicopter raids, police have decided to restart them. For more than 2 decades, aerial raids on cannabis plantations have been an annual event in New Zealand. Police take to the skies, often with the support of the Defence Force, to find and destroy cannabis crops. But last year, police decided to scrap the annual raids.
With the increased harm in many communities arising from other drugs, particularly methamphetamine, a one-size-fits-all annual aerial national cannabis operation no longer represents the most appropriate deployment of police resources.
Across Aotearoa, senior officers were divided about the effectiveness of the raids. Internal emails, seen by Q&A, showed that many senior officers thought the aerial raids weren't achieving much and weren't a good use of resources.
In Waitemata, we don't see any worthwhile benefit to this operation being run in our district.
The intelligence is not there to support the benefit realisation when our focus has been on other drugs.
That view has now been underscored by more internal documents. Research for the Evidence-Based Policing Centre, released under the Official Information Act, shows there is little empirical evidence available to suggest that crop eradication has a positive impact on the supply and availability of cannabis. And it's not possible to determine the extent to which the operations have reduced the harm caused by cannabis in the community. Despite that, this year police decided to restart the aerial operations in 6 different districts. Unlike previous raids, which were funded through the proceeds of crime, former Police Minister Poto Williams confirmed the $635,000 for aerial operations now comes straight out of the police operating budget. What's more, although the total cannabis seizures by police have increased over the last few years, the percentage of New Zealanders using cannabis is also going up. At a time when police resourcing is under huge scrutiny, critics say the aerial raids are a waste of time and money. Well, Green MP Chloe Swarbrick has been a vocal opponent of the aerial raids and obtained the police documents which show little evidence they substantially reduce cannabis supply or harm from the drug. Kia ora.
Morena.
What's your problem with aerial operations?
Well, I think first and foremost that they are indicative of the fact that drugs are winning the war on drugs. We've tried this approach for 40 to 50 years now, actually to only showcase that more and more people are using these substances. These substances are getting more harmful, and we are throwing good money after bad to get worse and worse results, actually. So what we're saying here, and what the police's own internal documents show, is that this is a waste of time and money, and we can deploy it to far better programs like Te Oranga.
OK, I've been through the documents and they are clear. There is little evidence that aerial operations have a meaningful impact on supply or meaningfully reduce harm, but it says that there is little evidence. It doesn't necessarily say those things are happening, or there is a distinction there, and it's an important distinction.
Yes, it is. And again, if we're to reflect that to the international research as well, you can see that typically where there is a focus just on that supply end too, that you also end up with all the more labs and people cooking all kinds of substances and continually trying to avoid that enforcement. Again, what we're looking at when we're looking at drugs, we have to say first and foremost drugs, whether they are alcohol, whether they are tobacco, whether they are cannabis, can cause harm. The next question then has to be, how do we sensibly regulate in order to reduce that harm? Because far from, we're not quite sure whether it's reducing harm, this current annual cannabis operation. And again, you know, better part of $1 million being spent on this. I can tell you for a fact, that deploying that money on the likes of Te Oranga, which is about reducing meth harm by targeting people's demand for it and improving their lives, has a return of $3 to $7 for every dollar spent.
OK, but $600,000, I know it's a lot of money. In the grand context of Crown expenditure, in the grand context of the police operating budget, it isn't that much money. And
I guess it's just another example of where, once again, drugs are winning this war on drugs, because this is not only the money. If you look to these internal documents and the correspondence between police, it's also actually the time off that ends up accumulating by virtue of continuing to persist with these things, which the majority of district commanders don't want in the first place. And it also detracts from business as usual, which most police say is already targeting these kinds of substances too.
When police halted the national operations for aerial raids last year, they then threw it over to different police districts. Why shouldn't police officers who know their districts, presumably better than anyone else, be in a position to actually make calls about what is best given the drug profile of their community? Well,
it's an interesting proposition, Jack, but it's not what's happening. So again, if you're to look into those internal police documents and the emails back and forth, actually this program is now being deployed in areas where the area commanders did not want it to go ahead because they thought that it was quote unquote an operation for sake of operation, that it was a waste of their time and their resources. And once again, it is simply about how do we best deploy these use resources to actually reduce this harm in the first place, as opposed to this charade of tin soldiers up in helicopters. We've been doing this for 20 plus years now, and in fact we've seen an increase in the consumption of cannabis.
Who is being targeted by these raids?
Well, again, all we can go off is the stats that the police provide us, because they don't break it down into granular catches. What we do know, though, speaking to those who've come forward to my office, for example, is that there's one couple who had the police drop in on their backyard to spray 3 cannabis crops.
Well, it's illegal.
It is illegal, and once again there's a range of illegal behaviour which is currently occurring across the country, and that's why the police also point out that this resources could be better deployed towards methamphetamine. And this is where I'll take you to Te Ara Oranga. So it's a program that was established, actually one of the final outgoing acts of the former national government in 2017, which looked at how do we improve people's lives to stop demand for methamphetamine and actually move towards more evidence-based, not only policing, but evidence-based drug harm reduction. And what they've seen in the 4 or 5 years subsequent to that is that it is the most effective program that we know of in this country with regard to drug harm reduction. 34% reduction in offending and $3 to $7 return on every single dollar spent. It's a collaboration between the DHB and police, and if we could put that money into those kinds of programs, then we would actually be walking the talk on drug harm reduction.
Were the couple that you know who had their 3 cannabis plants sprayed, were they charged? Were they arrested?
So they're still working through that process, but those plants were being used primarily for medicinal purposes.
But I mean, they weren't being prosecuted, were they?
Well, again, that couple is still working through that process, and I wouldn't want to, lift the veil of anonymity, because they did come forward for sake of blowing the whistle on this operation. And I think that's where it's incumbent on the police once again to showcase actually what is this doing to disrupt crime, to disrupt drug harm in this country. Because in fact, again, their own evidence-based policing documents show that it isn't having the impact that they seem to want it to.
New Zealanders had an opportunity to consider legalisation and they voted against it. I know the margin was narrow, but the truth is they had their opportunity, they voted against it. So why should police not be enforcing the law, cracking down on illegality, even if they then choose not to prosecute these people?
As the police, again, themselves have said in these internal documents, there's a number of ways that they can go about doing their jobs, and there are always competing demands. The police themselves pointing particularly to methamphetamine harm as where they want to be focusing those resources. In fact, what we see, sending police up in these choppers and deploying this across a number of districts in this country, is a suck on resources that could be better used in other places where there's still illegality going on.
Okay, would you be satisfied for aerial operations to continue if they didn't use helicopters, if they used drones? Because that is one thing police have been considering.
That is one of the things that they have been considering. And once again, I just point you to the bald facts, which are that there has been good money spent after bad for 20 plus years. We're talking tens of millions of dollars over that time, which has only serviced to simultaneously see us have an increase in cannabis consumption and therefore potential harm. So do we want to just be seen to do something, or do we actually want to do something that works? And that's where I totally take your point that actually, yeah, it is incumbent on the government, it is incumbent on our new Minister of Justice, if you're listening, the Honourable Kiri Tapu Allen, to change the law into something that works. Because what the police are operating with is a dog of legislation. The Frankenstein Misuse of Drugs Act 1975 is the thing that is driving this harm in the first place.
Well, what do you think the effect of the changes from 2019 in the Misuse of Drugs Act is happening on the prosecution and treatment of drug abuse?
What we've seen, so what you're referring to there is the Section 7 amendments by virtue of particularly the synthetics crisis that we saw. It's something that I campaigned really strongly for and was glad to get across the line, albeit not in the form that we wanted to, with New Zealand First and Labour last term. That enables the formalisation of what we call police discretion. So at the front lines, the police are able to say, we don't think that this person is going to be best suited by going into the criminal justice system. But what you've seen there, as reflected in the data, is that that discretion can still enable discrimination. So we're still seeing overrepresentation, and particularly historically and structurally marginalised communities.
Well, I've looked at those numbers. Māori are benefiting from discretion at roughly the same level as non-Māori. Māori are overrepresented in the offending in the first place, though. Yeah,
and again, that would come back to historical factors such as, again, the over-policing in certain areas. When you're talking about cannabis in particular, I think it's really important to point out that there's no data that showcases specifically that there is a massive increase in consumption in those different areas. But
there's a difference, right? Like in saying, OK, well, because one of the concerns when those changes to the Misuse of Drugs Act came through 3 years ago was that certain ethnic groups or certain communities would benefit from police discretion more than others. But from what we have from the evidence at the moment and internal police documents, it suggests that isn't happening.
But nonetheless, I'd also say that I think most people wouldn't want police at the front lines to be acting as judge and jury. We can still say that we want effective legislation that we know is going to be applied across the board in an equitable basis. Sure, there has been a relatively kind of uniform application on the front lines, but once again, what we're talking about is still that opportunity or that chance for people to get caught up in the criminal justice system and things to get a whole lot worse when there are those health-based opportunities to reduce harm.
If aerial operations are not effective in reducing harm or significantly reducing supply, why have they been restarted?
I can't begin to tell you. So having poured through all of those OAAs and read through 70 odd pages of internal police emails and, you know, a number of police actually speaking quite openly and frankly about how much of a waste of resources they think they are. There were a number of recommendations out of an internal 2019 report which made points about how there had to be better communication to the general public about the purpose of this if it was to go ahead. We didn't see that happen. There was also recommendations for there to be planning starting in May and June. We didn't see that happen. In fact, a lot of this internal correspondence comes from September and October. We also know, by virtue of my written questions to the former police minister, that there are 3 people in Police National Headquarters who are charged with running this operation centrally, despite the police simultaneously saying last year, when they decided last minute to ditch the operation, that they didn't want to see it nationally coordinated anymore. So something isn't adding up.
All right. Before we let you go, there have been some changes to the Green Party constitution this year around the leadership. I just wanted to know, is there any circumstance in which you would challenge either James Shaw or Marama Davidson for the leadership of the Green Party this year?
Mate, I didn't come into politics to climb the ranks. I'm in the Green Party for a reason. It's because I believe in stuff and I want to fight tooth and nail to change those things, not for a career.
So answer that question. Is there any circumstance?
I do not intend to challenge our leadership, no. I'm very happy.
All right.
billion is invested each year on state-controlled and state-licensed gambling. Now, another lucrative form of revenue for the state, the game of lotto, is in the pipeline. But casinos continue to be cold-shouldered. It's still illegal to open a gambling house, at least on shore. Enter the Casino Royale, the ship that sailed around the system.
Most business people that enter into a venture of this size, they put their shirt on the line. I put my underpants on it as well.
In most other casinos, you don't really get many high rollers in any case. It
was a thoroughly good evening. Yeah, it really was.
Some say it's decadent, others say it's a sin, but like it or not, New Zealand's first casino is alive and rolling. Sure, it's all happening 12 miles offshore, but that's the only legal way you can operate in a country where the gambling cards are stacked in favour of the state. New Zealand's first casino took to sea last weekend. The maiden voyage of the Casino Royale was a sellout. 120 people paid $125 a head to gamble the night away. Rolling the dice for profit onshore would fetch you a hefty fine. What you do outside territorial waters is your business. Because of the law, several attempts to set up casinos have floundered. But Auckland entrepreneur Ken Morgan found a loophole.
We were looking for alternative uses for the vessel at the end of the summer program. One option was that we took the vessel to Perth for the America's Cup. But we started exploring ways that we could perhaps get a casino operating and find some track through the Gaming Act.
Yeah, but a lot of people see casinos as links with gangsterism, with crime. Some people see gambling as a sin. Shouldn't we be taking some notice of that?
We can only look at the experiences in Australia, and that is not a problem. Crime has never been a problem in, we'll take West Point, for example, the longest established casino in Australia. The local police department, in fact, have stated in the first few years of its operation, the crime rate in Hobart went down. Now, nobody's going to convince me that a casino adds to the crime rate.
The age-old suggestion has been that there are legal problems, that they encourage an undesirable element. Those are the sorts of problems that have been associated with casinos worldwide, not just in New Zealand.
That's the way Internal Affairs Minister Peter Tapsell sees casinos, and he says legalising onshore gambling houses isn't on the government's agenda.
It's a matter that the present government hasn't given any attention to at all, and as we're about to introduce lotto, I don't think the government will be doing so in the near future.
I think the New Zealand's first gambling ship weighs in at 600 tonnes. Nowhere as big as the Cook Strait ferries, but nonetheless a multi-million-dollar investment for Ken Morgan and his shipping company. Some would say a casino's a licence to print money, but even casinos have gone broke. Deep down, do you still have any qualms, you know, that things could go wrong, that you could wind up losing money and having to get out fast?
Yes. Yes, it bothers me. Not that I'm going to get out fast, no, not that part. But yes, in any new venture, one always has concerns and qualms, and is it going to work? Are the public going to like what we're doing? Yes, it's a concern.
Downtown bus terminal Auckland, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The casino's first patrons are bound for Marsden Point, where the Gulf Explorer is ready to steam them to their gambling sanctuary. It'll take 2 hours to reach the ship, and another 2 hours before the first bets can be legally laid.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard on the inaugural trip of the casino cruise. On behalf of our
4 hours might seem a lot of travelling, but no one's too worried about that when there's a buck to be made.
Very, very lucky. I wish you all good luck. I hope you're luckier than I am.
It's a serious business, this gambling lark. Do you stick your dough on the red or black? And will you keep your food down? At least the weather looks okay at the moment. Bill, why did you decide to come on this floating casino trip?
Well, we enjoy going to Housey and the trots and the races. Last week it was a milestone birthday in my life, and we heard the advertisement on radio for last Friday night, and my fiancée Jane said that'd be a good part of the celebration. Let's go. I said,
a milestone birthday, what's that? 40?
Past that.
50. Of course, the casino was supposed to have begun operations a week earlier, but it hadn't complied with marine regulations. This time, too, there were fears of some last-minute hitch, but as they say, all went right on the night. Sailing into the safe area is a precise business. You can't just go 12 miles from the mainland. You have to be 12 miles from our offshore islands like the Hen and Chickens. Venture too far and you're in cooks and stewards territory, and with non-union staff on board there could have been industrial ructions. Casino Royale could hardly have picked a much calmer night for what Ken Morgan saw as his chapter in New Zealand's history.
Hopefully we'll start a thing. So that next year... Would you like to come to the gardens to be our videographer?
Yeah, sure.
For Sunday.
Sure, man. That's so cool. Yeah, definitely. Those are great.
Ladies and gentlemen, that historic moment has arrived. The moment that you will relate to your grandchildren. I hope you have a lucky night. Ladies and gentlemen, place your bets.
Roulette's fun when you're playing with the office money. The facilities mightn't have been as lavish as Monte Carlo, but Casino Royale had all the trappings of the tables. The croupiers, too, had international experience. Russell Bursma spent 2 years in a casino at Amsterdam. He says you can never be sure how the cards will fall.
Like if you're playing blackjack, say for example, and you have 100 chips, after 100 bets you should end up with 95 chips. But it doesn't always work like that. You may end up with 500 chips after betting that 100 chips.
I see. And so it's possible, is it? Are you saying for a casino owner to actually lose?
Yes.
And lose in a big way?
Lose in a big way.
Do you know of actual instances where casinos have gone down the tubes?
I have known of that in Amsterdam, yes.
And what happens? I mean,
close up shop and go home.
Have you any idea how the things are going tonight?
I think it's going reasonably well by the look of it.
For whom though?
I think it's pretty evenly matched. From what I've been dealing on the tables, I think everyone's had a fair go tonight.
It's now well into the night and the ship is keeping on the move. Outside, they assure us, the 12-mile limit. Inside, thousands of dollars have already changed hands. At the roulette wheel, a lot of interest is centered on this man who's betting big with a large pile of chips and what looks like a system. But if you couldn't handle the big stuff, there was always the poker machine. Remember Phil Dromgoole and his fiancée Jane celebrating Phil's 50th birthday? Well, we checked on their bank balances in the wee small hours.
We've had a wonderful time. We've spent a few dollars, but there's some chips off the blackjack. Jane's done all right on the Crown and Anchor, and we've had we did have a bucket full of this off here, but there we are.
But you put it back in the machine?
Yes. Oh, well, they do swallow it up fairly quickly.
If you don't mind me asking, what sort of job do you do that gives you the money to come and gamble?
Well, Jane and I are in the money all day, every day. We work for the Reserve Bank.
For the Reserve Bank?
And the boss was most concerned that perhaps we'd sort of tickled the Peter a little bit to pay for this expedition.
You don't think this is a move by Roger Douglas to fix up the deficit?
He'll be on to it a bit later. He'll be on to it a bit later, I think.
It's almost 4 a.m. when gambling is to halt, when the switches will be thrown on the pokies and the covers put back on the tables. This man has a sensational last pull, the jackpot. But how did our big spender at the roulette table finish up? He preferred to remain anonymous, but he was happy to talk about his night out.
I have played before.
What, at the casinos around the world?
I had one trip to Hobart many years ago.
But you're not, in fact, an experienced player, would you say?
I've played quite a bit.
I say that because you appeared to be working from a system.
I just write down numbers, and I have a selection of bets. Yes.
Yes. How did that selection of bets work tonight?
I didn't lose.
That's a very cagey answer. Did you in fact come out on top?
Yes.
Quite well on top. I mean, were you?
Not a big winner, but a winner.
What do you think casinos would do for New Zealand?
Well, they might do away with a lot of illegal or illicit gambling, for one thing, where it could be brought out into the open and played legitimately.
So New Zealand's first casino is alive and rolling. For the first time, New Zealanders have a chance to gamble legally on the numbers and the cards. How did the casino itself make out? Well, Ken Morgan might have done better on the blackjack table.
Initial reports I've had from the cashier's office are that we're slightly down, but we can live with that. The important thing, particularly for the first cruise, is that everybody's happy.
Slightly down?
Slightly down. That's the initial report.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it doesn't bother me in the slightest.
But aren't you in this game to make a profit?
Of course, but casinos can lose just as well as win. We've had some big winners tonight. We have to live with that.
When you say big winners, what do you mean by that?
Oh, we've had people taking home over $6,000, some saying over $3,000. That's a lot of money.
Well, there hasn't been any widespread public clamour for casinos to be introduced. The matter hasn't been discussed by the government. I think if there were widespread public support for it, the government would investigate them and come down with some proposal.
If the Minister was sitting right here now, what would you say to him?
I would say, Minister, we've got 120 responsible adults that have had a good night out. Why should the law stop them enjoying themselves? It's time to change it. It's time to allow a New Zealand company with New Zealand's operating it with the right capital backing to build a casino on shore.
It's very epic skies.
That was another one of Russell's ideas. He said, listen, we'll get worldwide publicity if when you're presented to Princess Anne, you just take her in your arms and just give her a big passionate kiss on the lips. And I said, do you think that's wise? He said, look, it'll work. We'll get front page all around the world. I said, but I could get in the shit for that, Russell. He said, you'll handle it. You'll handle it. Yeah. We're right behind you, Larry. On the show, got word of it, and we're backstage at Western Springs. Max Cryer comes in because he was organising the entire thing. He was in charge. He was presenting this Royal Command.
Yeah, we should be up here. I was just going to say, you get down. Don't drop you off.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. We should put a check. Can't believe we can capture this. Cool. So where do you want to sit?
I was going to see if we could grab one of these seats over there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the lights are showing up great on the camera.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you see there.
I'm just walking my way down to Parliament because there's no room in the van. It's not far from here anyway. Yep. That was good. I saw this on the way up in the car, but I didn't have time to take a video of it. It's pretty cool. Some new graffiti or something. Hey look, Parliament's even got its own light show going on. Bum bum bum. Bum bum bum. Bum bum bum. I'm sneaking around Parliament after dark, so I'm putting some sneaking around music. Now this is beautiful, but it's also kind of sad. I mean, I used to work on Lambton Quay Macca's, and you know, I used to work the close shift, which was closing at midnight, and there used to be a lot of people coming in the last hour or so. But like this kind of thing, you know, you see that bar there and it's completely shut, and it's just an interesting thing about Wellington is that I think the nightlife has basically been completely fucked by COVID, and I'm showing you my building from the outside this time. So this is, I think Nalini owns this place as well as the dairy. But yeah, this is my building from the outside.